Greetings. I want to welcome you to Nyali Baptist Church, where we're going to have a discussion today about some of the issues that we are facing as a nation, as a county, and also the things that are affecting us world over, what we call, what is now commonly known as COVID-19. But today we'll be talking with the youth, and together with the youth we'll be having our own mom, who is a counseling psychologist, who will help us to understand some of the things that we are going through as young people and help us mitigate some of the challenges that we are facing today. So if I may want to take some time to introduce our young people today, I'll begin with Ruth. We have Ruth together with us. Then we have Leah. She's also here with us. Then we have Steve together with us. And they'll be taking some time to ask questions that hopefully will be able to help us demystify the challenges that we are having as young people. And maybe before they say anything, I'd like to ask our mom to introduce herself a bit more. Then we can have some of the questions from our panelists today.
Well, thank you so much, Pastor. I'm so glad to be here, to be able to talk with our youth about what's happening worldwide. Now, my name is Grace Kikuvi, and I'm a counseling psychologist. I'm also a member of this church, that's Nyali Baptist Church. I belong to the women ministry. Thank you so much, Pastor.
Thank you so much for introducing yourself, Mom. So let me ask Ruth to tell us and ask us, what are some of the things that you really feel that you need to know or to understand in regards to this issue of COVID-19?
Thank you so much, Pastor and Mom Grace. Okay, so on to our first question. We have been hearing the COVID-19 situation being termed as a pandemic. So basically, Mom Grace, could you kindly please tell us and explain to us what a pandemic is?
Yeah, thank you for that. Now, the word pandemic has been used many times because of what is happening here. Now, anytime you hear the word pandemic, number one, what should come into your mind is a crisis. And it becomes a pandemic when the crisis affects many nations, multiple nations. Now, as it is now, this pandemic has affected the entire world. That is why it's called a pandemic. And it is a health crisis. And I want to believe that people are working and people are researching to find out more about this COVID-19. So we are all talking about a crisis. And it's not just a crisis. This is a severe crisis that's affecting the entire world.
Okay, thank you so much for that. On to our second question. Initially, there was a stereotype that COVID-19 virus only affects the elderly, but in the real sense, we have seen young children being affected, the youth. So does it mean that anyone can be affected by COVID-19?
Yeah, the answer is yes. Anyone can be affected. Remember, this is a new infection, or it's a virus that has not been seen before, and there is a lot of research that is going on. Now, initially, the target was the aged. And with time now, of course, with the statistics have shown that even the children, young children, and the elderly, the youth, they are both affected. And you know, this pandemic or this virus is no respecter of man. It's a virus that is affecting the rich. It's a virus that affects the poor, the children, the youth, the elderly, the men and the women. So it is good for you to know that it can affect anyone.
Thank you. That leads us to our next question. So how can we as young people and as the youth cope with fear of contacting the virus, fear of our loved ones having the virus, fear of also not being sure whether we will ever go back to normalcy because we have seen people losing their jobs? So how do we basically go around that?
Now, you find that there is a lot of fear in the entire world. People are so fearful because of what's happening around. There's loss of job, there's economic decline, there's the issue of infection, and many other issues. So you find that people are panicking. And fear is an emotional disturbance. And one of the symptoms that you are stressed, it comes as a result of stress. One of the symptoms that you are stressed, you become fearful. Now, when I talk of fear, we have got two types of fear. We have the rational fear, and we have the irrational fear. So sometimes, the fear that we're experiencing is irrational. You find somebody trying to imagine that they're already sick, yet they are not sick. Some people start imagining that my family is going to be infected, yet they are safe. And anytime you uphold irrational fear, then of course, depending on how far you take it, it can be pathological. But fear is a natural response to any issue that is uncomfortable or that is unknown. So when you display fear, it doesn't mean that you are abnormal. You are a very normal person. But the question is it rational or is it irrational? Now, some of us are panicking because we are looking at what has happened to our neighbor, what has happened to our relative, and what is happening to the entire world. Now, the thing is, of course, I want to agree with you that there is loss of employment and all these other fears. But now what we need to do is we need to understand our fears before we are able to tackle it. Is it irrational? Have you taken the necessary steps to take care of yourself? That is a key issue before you start panicking. Of course, you will panic because you are stressed up. Of course, you will panic because of the social media. You will panic because of so much information that is going around. But that is acceptable. The thing is, the state of your heart, the state of your mind, it will determine how far you are taking that fear. Because the thing you need to know is that not everybody is panicking. For example, you can go through the same experience, but the way you perceive the experience will determine on how you handle it. Perception in this case is very important. How are you perceiving this pandemic? How are you perceiving your family in this situation? So that perception, of course, it's going to determine how you are going to handle the issue. So when it comes to looking at your family and imagining they are not working, yes, some of them have lost their jobs. But this is the time when we need to stay sober as much as possible. Because remember, number one, we are confined. That is stressful in its own way. And then number two, apart from that, you are so fearful. You are imagining that now you are sick. You are imagining now you have been quarantined. Those are irrational thoughts that would affect you. And of course, they will produce psychological disturbance. I am talking about your mental state, and I'm also talking about your emotional state. You find that this fear, if it is not well handled, it is going to bring panic attacks. I'm a counseling psychologist, and I do telehealth counseling, that is telephone counseling. And sometimes people call you and say, you know what, I can't breathe, I am so afraid. That's a panic attack. And what happens, of course, is going to affect your breathing faculty. So fear can, if you don't manage it well, it can result in other things, in other complications. So make sure that you are sober. How do you remain sober? Look at the fear. Identify that this is my fear. It is so important to know what you are fearing. My fear is loss of employment. My fear is for my parents to be infected. My fear is for me to be infected, for example. Identify that fear. If it's about infection, Number one, have you observed the health requirements? Because you got to talk to yourself. Remember, it is you who is fearful. So you have to ask yourself questions to be able to handle fear. Have you taken good care of yourself? Yes. Then what next? So what is your fear? The fear is that my father may lose his job, for example. Your dad is still employed. Those are just imaginations. That is what I call irrational fear. But it is not pathological to fear. But how far are you taking that fear? What are you doing with this fear? Because if you don't manage it, remember the panic attacks, then there'll be anxiety, and of course other psychological problems.
Thank you. That's quite encouraging. I'm already feeling encouraged and well motivated. So how do we then stay connected to our family members, to our friends, and be healthy and sane during this social distancing period?
Wow, that's nice. During this period, sanity is what we all require. Remember, number one, we have never lived maybe confined in one place for many hours. And that is exactly what is happening, because there are some youth who are not allowed to go out at all. Number one, you find that the parents or the guardians or the caretakers themselves are anxious. And sometimes if we are not careful or they are not careful, they spill over this anxiety to the children. So you find that none of the family members is sober because we are all anxious. Now, when it comes to the family, it depends on the previous family environment. The problems come in because of the previous family environment. Now, if the family environment has been conducive right from the beginning, then it will not be too hard for us to live together in that small space. And here the problem is not even the physical space. The problem is the emotional space. Each one of us require emotional space. And that is key. Because if we don't take care of our emotional space, then you find other problems will come in. So how do you take care of your emotional space? When you take care of your emotional space, then you will be able somehow to manage living with your family, with your friends, whoever you are staying with. Now, what do? Sometimes you give yourself time out within the family setup. Look for your corner and just be alone. Because when you're emotional crowded, it can irritate. So depending on the size of the house, you can get your safe corner, sit there, be quiet, and just think about whatever. But let your emotions also be positive. Now, that is how we take care of our emotional state or emotional space. Also, we need to stay sober. Sometimes we find that we watch the TV too much and for so long. And what you are listening to is just about COVID-19, how many are dead, how many are infected. And if you are already excited or if you're already fearful, just imagine what you have done to yourself. You have aggravated that fear. So also another thing to take care of your fears is see what you're digesting. That will help you to take care of your fears. But the most important thing is to remain positive.
So I also have some few questions. Currently, especially you have said about social media, sometimes you find yourself panicking, sometimes you find yourself exhausted. So how can you overcome this feeling as youth?
Thank you. I think we are going back to the issue of stress. These are signs and symptoms of stress, exhaustion, physical sign or symptom of stress. Now, what is stress here? Because let me tell you, we are all stressed up, but levels are different. We are all at different levels of stress. Now, why are you fatigued? Because there is so much demand that has been placed on the body, and the body is unable to accommodate. That is what causes stress. That pressure, there is so much pressure. For example, what is the pressure here? We've just talked about loss of employment. We've just talked about maybe not going back to school. We've just talked about how will it be after this pandemic. So there is so much pressure in your body that your body is producing certain symptoms physically, emotionally, even spiritually. That is what happens to fatigue. So here we need to manage our stress levels, because now the stress level is coming out physically. Fatigued. How do you take care of fatigue? The best thing you can do to take care of fatigue is to exercise. Do some physical exercise, because fatigue is a physical symptom. Walk around. We have not been stopped from walking. You can get out of the house and walk. You can do a bit of physical exercise, because you have to release that stress from the body for you to feel better. And because we have more every day to accommodate, then you need to do daily exercise, at least 10 minutes. But you are young guys, you can do more than that. Get out and walk. Do something in the house. Wash the dishes and walk around and make sure that the body is active so that you release that fatigue from your body and you allow the body to take in more, because we still have much more to take in. Yeah.
So furthermore, also with all that is happening, there are a lot of disappointments that we are facing, like the fact that schools are getting cancelled, graduations right now, if someone is supposed to graduate, it's on hold. Some of us have lost our jobs. So how do you deal with all that disappointment?
Wow, disappointments. That is there. Many people are disappointed. It's not only the youth. Even the grown-ups, they are disappointed. Why? Because our expectations have been cut short. Each one of us had an expectation. By this month, I will be somewhere. For example, I was going to go for a meeting in Uganda, end of this month. And you can imagine what I went through before I accepted it. Now, the best thing I did to myself was to accept that, look here, Grace, you are not going to travel. I don't want to live in denial, because sometimes when we live in denial is when we also go through this same stress. Accept that, you know what, things must change. And this is the program. I'm supposed to graduate end of this year, for example, and I've not finished my coursework. I have not finished my thesis. What do I do? The thing that should comfort you is that you are not alone. Of course, schools have been shut down. People are not going to college. Some people are not going to work. So the thing you should tell yourself is that I am not alone. Of course, I'm disappointed, but I am not alone. So what do you do? For those that are maybe still working on their thesis, on their projects, then you can get time, sober up, and get time to do something. Because this thing is not here to stay. It will pass away for sure. And you must now think post-COVID. What will happen after everything else is good, is cleared? That is a question that you should ask yourself. And when you look into the future, then you find that you demystify your fears, your disappointments. Because sure enough, it will come to an end.
Thank you. Thank you for that. My last question is just basically, what are the life purposes that we can get just from this crisis? The life purposes that we can have.
Life purposes, that is very personal. Because my purpose in life is different from the other. The family purpose is different from the other. So we cannot really look at it wholesomely, but let me try to see how best I can answer this. Purpose. Number one, what is your value? When you are looking at life purpose, look at your life values. Because your values will determine your purpose. Your values will determine your goal to life. So the first thing is value. What is it when it comes to value? What do you value in this life? We have got different values. We have got individual values. We have got family values. We have got Christian values. But it is up to you now to see, what do I need out of this life? And then again, another point is perception. Perception is very important. When you look at this life, when you look at what's happening around, what do you see? And where do you see yourself? These are some of the questions you should ask yourself so that you are able to understand your purpose as an individual, the purpose of your family at such a time, and even beyond. So you look at values, you look at perception, and then you look at your decision making. You must decide, yes, these are my values, and this is how I perceive life, and this is what I'm going to do. Those three things are very important to enable you know and see about life purpose.
Okay, I also have a question to you, Ma'am Grace. And my question is, my school fellows, they have access to online education. And I feel disadvantaged in one way or another. So, and I have to compete with them effectively. So I'm stressed. How do I handle that?
I can empathize with you. What you're saying is very true. There are people who have got access to some of these technologies, while others have not. You are very disappointed. You are very stressed. You are wondering how you are going to compete with those people who are already ahead of you. I do empathize, and you're not alone. Even at the primary level, I hear parents talking about that. But then, at the end of the day, you ask yourself, is there anything I can do about it? Yes, I am disappointed. Yes, I'm feeling annoyed. I'm feeling disadvantaged. Yes, that's natural. But is there anything you can do about it? If there is nothing you can do about it, then accept the situation as temporary. See whether there is any other way you can have access to books, you can have access to information, because there is very little you can do. And you know, at the end of the day, when the college opens, you are going to compete equally with them. So it's about you and accepting the situation and coming up with a strategy. What can I do? Can I use my phone to access information? Can I call my friends to find out what they have done? And let me see what I can do better. Because here is about what you can do better to accommodate the situation.
Thank you, Ma'am Grace. I'm coming to my second question, and I want to say that we have seen so many people die during this pandemic. We have seen people get infected. Is there hope that we'll one day come back to where we were before COVID-19 came?
Yes, there is hope. I don't want to imagine that there is no hope. First of all, as a Christian, I know with God all things are possible. I know God can restore. So that's my conviction. There is hope. Of course, we can get back to where we were, but it's going to take time. This is a massive loss. Economically, globally, it's massive. So we don't just expect to recover overnight. It's going to be a process, and it's going to be a long process. But of course, there's going to be recovery. How long? I won't tell. About the vaccine, how long? I won't tell. But of course, they are busy working on trying to recover man through the vaccine and through the healing, and to recover the economy. You find that, that's why you find that even our President, Honorable Kenyatta, has started, allowing certain sectors, the food sector, to start operating. What is he trying to do? He's slowly trying to recover. Slowly, of course, very slowly. He's trying to recover the economy and trying to help people do something and start earning for themselves.
To my last question, after this pandemic, how do we adapt with the situation that we have gone through? How do we accept the situation that we have gone through during this pandemic?
Thank you so much. Now, when it comes to adjustment, it depends on your personality type. It depends on your makeup. There are people who adjust very quickly to situations, and while there are others who take some time. How hard has this situation hit you as an individual, as a family? And what about your perception? What about your mental health? What about your emotional health? So it depends on how hard it has hit you. But one thing I want you to know is that when you're looking at certain situations, you have to look at them as an individual, because these things affect us differently. For example, I had a client who, they used to be very rich. And then, of course, something happened and they lost the wealth. That's not easy. And there were two in the family. You can imagine what happened. One of them picked up so fast, and this other one went down completely. He was unable to pick up. Why? Any situation that you go through, how you perceive it will determine whether you will rise up or will remain down there. Perception is very important. So when you're going through a situation, perceive it, judge it, study it, to understand it. Then you should be able to come up with a good plan on how to proceed. So it's all about perception. What is your perception? Are we going to recover? I say yes, we are going to recover. It's going to take time. So perception is very important. And at this point, look at it individually.
As we look at the aspects of perception and how to put the future in perspective, how can we as believers place God in all of this? Being young people within the church, how do we put God, how do we allow God to work within us even as we face this pandemic?
Thank you. As a Christian, how do we bring in the issue of perception? The first thing is to know what the Word of God says in that particular situation. Know and understand the promises of God. Number two, you must trust in the Word of God. Just like that, like a small child. Because God, you have said, those who trust in you shall not be put to shame. Because God, you have said, you are going to clear this mountain. You have said, if we have faith, we are going to command this mountain to go into the depth of the sea. Because you have said, I'm going to speak the word. So the issue of perception is knowing God, understanding the Word of God, and mixing it with faith, and then you speak the Word of God according to that Word and according to what you're going through. So it's important to have knowledge of the Word of God at such a time. Speak, believe it first, because you must mix this Word with faith. Then speak it out and allow God to be God. Because where we are now, everybody is looking for a way out. We are looking for a refuge. Most people have become very religious. You know, somehow we are so religious. You talk to somebody and it's like, do you know God? Yes, I believe in God. I know God. Yes. Because we are vulnerable. Because we are fearful. Because we want to come out. But there is more to that. Let your perception be based on the Word of God. Yes, I am fearful. But Lord, what does the Word say? So it is up to you now to fill in that Word in that place called perception, so that the Word of God can open your eyes of understanding. Then you'll be able to know what to do.
Thank you so much. We thank God for the time that we've had together in this first session. Remember, after this, we're going to have another session where we'll be looking at how do I live with the people around me, even as we consider the aspect of COVID-19. So at this point, I'd like to say, Asante Sana, thank you, Ma'am, for this moment that you've given us. And as we prepare to come back to the next session, so just be there. Thank you so much.